How do you deal with an employee with a bad attitude? It can be really difficult and feel really confusing, particularly if they're hitting targets and you just don't know how to deal with it. In this video, I am going to explain it all. Hello, my name's Jenefer. I'm the founder of Silk Helix and we help small employers with all things HR, people management and employment law. So let's dive in. The first problem with bad attitude is that it's a judgment. It needs defining. Your definition of bad attitude and my definition of bad attitude may well be two very different things. So firstly, it's a really unhelpful term, and actually what we want to be looking at is what are the behaviours that we are defining when we say bad attitude. What are we really talking about? We then need to look at, and this requires an honest look at ourselves as business owners or managers, what's the cause of this bad attitude? Is it that they simply are somebody that either has a very negative outlook on life or can't regulate their own emotions? Basically, is it them? Are they bringing this into the business? Or is there a cultural problem within the business and actually what they're doing is reacting to the way their manager is treating them, reacting to the expectations put on them? And quite often these people, the people that are actually just not very happy in this situation and they are saying something we don't want to hear, often they won't stick around very long. These people will tend to look for alternatives because they're generally more positive people, they just can see the problems. So it's worth taking a really honest look at your team, your company, and looking at what is the issue here. Is this one individual that's causing a problem, or actually do we have a cultural issue, which means that when people speak up, we're just labelling that as a bad attitude, and actually what they're trying to do is tell us what's going wrong so that we can learn from it. But let's assume that we're dealing with the first one. We're dealing with somebody where it's just them, they have a negative approach or they can't regulate emotions and they are disruptive to the team, possibly lashing out on people, just generally causing problems. So firstly, we need to identify what behaviour is a problem, what is causing the issues, and clearly set our expectations. So often we set expectations by writing job descriptions, setting targets, and we focus only on the outcomes, we focus only on the tasks, we focus very much on the job as this isolated bit that an individual does. And quite often, people which are labelled with a bad attitude can be hitting targets. They could be achieving the things that you need. So if you're looking at, well, we want to deal with this, but actually, when we look at our expectations, they're hitting all of that, then firstly, your expectations are wrong. So you need to be considering behaviour in your expectations. And that includes in the way that you write your job descriptions, in things like values that you operate as a company and how you want people to behave towards each other. I go into more detail on this in my video about writing job descriptions. Take a look there and you'll see what I mean by setting expectations, writing job descriptions that consider behaviours as well as tasks. Once you've got that, you'll be in a much stronger position to manage people across the board, not just this individual, but everybody, because you're really clear then about what it is you're looking for when you're recruiting, what it is that you expect people to achieve, and they know what you expect, so they've got a much better chance of achieving it. Once you've got that, you need to be able to have the conversation with them about their bad attitude. Now, the problem is, if we go into a conversation saying, you've got a bad attitude, that's a judgment that could be argued with. So they can come back with, well, no, I haven't. Or, but it's them over there, or I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for that person, or I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for the fact that the company does this. There's all sorts of arguments that they can bring in because we've used a judgment. We also can't improve on a judgment. So if somebody tells me that I've got a bad attitude, unless I go away and can define that for myself, work out what they meant, work out what their definition of bad attitude was, and try and fix it, it's not likely to fix because actually it's not really constructive. I don't really know what I'm doing wrong. So what we need to be thinking about and looking at is defining what behaviours we're actually talking about. So is it that the person arrives into work in the morning and is particularly grumpy or rude. But even if we're saying those things, we want to define, so what is it they've said, what is it they've done, why when people interpret it as bad or negative. And that's where we also talk about the impact of the behaviour. So we're talking very specifically about what the behaviour is and what the impact of that behaviour is. And that gives something for the person to work on, to be able to improve, because they now know exactly what they're doing wrong and exactly what your expectations are and why this is a problem. So you've had this conversation, you're defining the behaviour, you're talking about the impact of it. Ask them why. Understand what's going on for them. Especially if this is somebody who's changed recently, they've always been very positive and now they're suddenly negative or seem to have this bad attitude. Make sure that we're really understanding why and get them involved in that. And at this point, I'd also be listening to their responses really clearly, and I'd be looking for, are they taking ownership? Are they taking responsibility for their own actions, for their own behaviour? They can talk about why, and they can talk about an underlying reason, and that reason could be linked to work, it could be linked to something outside of work, but are they taking responsibility for the behaviour that they're exhibiting and the impacts of that behaviour? Because it's when somebody does that you're able to work with them to try and improve, because they're only going to improve if they agree that there's a problem. If they don't think there's a problem, or they think the problem is everybody else but not them, then they're not likely to change and improve. And those are the situations where you may be at the point of starting to say, actually, we've got to consider whether we need to dismiss this person, even if they're hitting targets, achieving the things you need them to achieve, because they could well be and are likely to be having negative impacts on others in the team, whether others achieve, whether people leave, which is going to cost you money in terms of replacement, recruiting people, all of these things. So really think about what the impacts of this behaviour is, not just in individual situations, but across the wider team, and how it impacts across the wider company in terms of how others may react, and as I say, may even leave your employment as a result of this individual. If somebody has under 2 years of service, it can be a lot easier to deal with, particularly if there's no underlying reason for it. It's worth spotting it, dealing with it, and trying to either manage it and improve it, or getting to the point of dismissal before someone gets to 2 years. If you've realised by this point that somebody has got a bad attitude, they're causing problems within the business, you need to deal with it, because it's going to have a longer term impact on the business. It's unlikely to get better. It's unlikely to improve, and therefore it's just going to keep getting worse. It's going to keep carrying on and keep impacting the business. The only difference is if somebody is truly taking accountability for their behaviour and wants to change, and they are presenting how they think that they can make improvements, things that they think that can change, and that they are doing that from within them, even if you're also talking about things that could support them within the company, but they are taking that within them. That's a really great sign that this person does want to improve, that perhaps something's been going on for them, perhaps that they can fix this and it won't have lasting impacts on the company. So just to wrap up there, make sure that you've got your expectations set really clearly, and I really do recommend that you take a look at my video on job descriptions, because that looks there at behaviours as well as tasks, outlines to the individual where they're going wrong, so exactly what behaviours are causing you to define that as a bad attitude. Really think about those behaviours. What is it that you've seen? What is it that you've heard? What is it that others are seeing and hearing? Really be specific about that. Talk about the impact of it and talk to them about why it's happening. Make them see that there is an impact of the behaviours. Hopefully they will take accountability for that and support in making improvements. And if not, you may need to consider dismissing, which I do strongly recommend that you take advice if you are looking to dismiss, to make sure that you don't end up in an employment tribunal with an unfair dismissal claim. If you've got any questions, please do pop them in the comments below and I will look to answer every single one. If you've enjoyed this video, found it useful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss a single one.